Jester, level 25 upgrade. And here we have Jester's next upgrade, RC Screws Stainless Steel Screw Kit. This was donated to me by Coyote0976. Thanks again, man. Now, out of all the RC Screws kits that I've gotten so far, this one does not have as many screws. But even though it doesn't have that many screws, a lot of these screws are going to be a pain to get to. So let's go ahead and begin by taking off all four of the tires. Now that the tires are taken off, it's almost time to begin this process. But before I do, I want to go ahead and tell you that they do have every single screw in here to replace all the ones that are on this RC. They also include the nuts, even ones to replace the wheel nuts. They also, on top of that, put in some Allen wrenches, 1.5, 2, and 2.5 millimeter, which you're going to need because all these are hex. If you don't have the hex screwdrivers, you can always use these Allen wrenches. They're pretty good quality. I've never been able to strip any. So the first step is taking off the gear cover because we need to remove the motor and ESC. So I'm going to be removing this screw that holds on the motor to the motor mount and this screw that holds on the gear cover. This one will have to be replaced. And just to let you know, every screw that I'm going to be pulling off that can be replaced, I'm going to compare it to the screws that are in the kit. Once I find a matching size, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this into a metal tray and just hold on to it for later uses. Now, one thing I have to note, some of the screws in the kit are a little bit longer than the screws that come on the stock RC. So just be wary of that. If they are too long, you can always file them down or cut them with some bolt cutters. So I'm going to go ahead and start by pulling off the gear cover and unplugging the ESC from the motor. Now I'm going to open this battery door so I can slide the ESC out. Then I'm going to grab the heatsink, pull that off, set it to the side, pull the motor to the side, and then just pull it backwards. And now I can set that off somewhere where it won't be in the way. Now I'm going to be taking this receiver box apart, and a clever little trick I found out is get a permanent marker and mark the wires. This way you know how much you should have them into the receiver box. So once you mark your wires, go ahead and remove these 4 screws and replace them. So you'll notice that I have some stainless steel screws on here already. Well, the ones that were on there before that were in really bad shape, and thankfully I had some leftover screws from my other stainless steel screw kits. But the majority of these are stock, but I will go ahead and point out every single screw that you can replace. So let's keep going. You're going to go ahead and replace this grub screw with the stainless steel, and then you're going to take off all 3 of the skid plates. The front one's held in with 5 screws, the middle one's held in with 8 screws, and the back one is held in with 4 screws. Once the screws are out of the way, you're going to go ahead and pull off all 3 of the skid plates. And this is when you got to be careful. These little pegs can slide out, and those are the things that are holding in your A-arms. So if you lose them, you're in trouble. There's 4 in the front and 4 in the rear. Now you need to go ahead and remove the front and rear center drive line from the transmission. There's a grub screw on the top and a grub screw on the bottom. Once those grub screws are out of the way, you're just going to slide off the drive shafts and then let the transmission fall on out. Now it's time to start taking this thing apart. First thing you're going to want to do is remove this nut. So in order for you to remove this nut, you're going to have to use your 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench. You're going to stick it through the hole on this side, hold it in place, and then you can go ahead and unscrew it. Once you get that out of the way, you're going to pull off the collapsible spring, followed by the spur gear and the slipper clutch pad. Now be careful not to lose that little bar because it can slide out. Now we can go ahead and replace the screws that are holding the transmission together. These are by far the hardest screws to get to on this RC, but once you get these done with, it's all downhill from here. So for this, you're going to be replacing the 4 that hold in the motor mount plate, the 2 that hold the transmission case together, and the 1 in the back that holds the peg to the motor mount plate. Now that all the screws have been replaced, it's time to go ahead and put the slipper clutch back together. Now in case you're wondering, yes, they had to use Phillips head for some of these screws just so they can keep it at the right size. Otherwise, if they switch it over to hex, it would be too big and the screw wouldn't fit right. So we're going to go ahead and slide on the slipper clutch pad, make sure it slides all the way down, followed by the spur gear, the collapsible spring, and finally the nut. And just like I showed you how to take it off, you're you're going to use a 1.5mm Allen wrench, slide it through the back, tighten it down all the way, and then loosen it 1/2 turn. Once that's taken care of, you're going to go ahead and get the front bottom center drive line and attach it to the front. Now, the only screw that they don't include in this kit is the elongated grub screws, so you're just going to have to stick with the stock ones. But you're going to go ahead and attach it back to the front of the transmission, screw it all the way down, and now you get to deal with the most painstaking part of this whole process. So you'll notice that there is a flat line that goes across this side of the drive shaft. Well, there's a corresponding flat line that goes across that drive shaft. You're going to want to line those up perfectly. When you slide in the transmission, you want this bottom part to go into the top part and then push it down. Once you get the transmission in there, you're going to get the bottom drive shaft and you're going to slide it back on to the transmission and then reattach that grub screw. After that, you're going to flip onto the top and it's time to replace the 2 screws that hold in the servo or servo plate. Now when you remove these 2 screws, the servo guard's going to come out as well. And that's the time that you're going to want to replace this screw that holds the steering bell crank arm to the servo. I won't be able to replace this screw because this is a specialty size that was made for this servo and it's not included in the kit that I have. After that, it's time to go ahead and work on the shocks. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the top and bottom screw for each one of the 4 shocks. Alright, once you take off all the shocks, you're going to see that there is a screw underneath every shock. All 4 of those have to be changed. After that, I need to go ahead and remove the 3 screws that hold in the front body mount. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the body mount, and I need to replace this screw up front. On this, I need to replace 4 screws, 2 for the bumper and 1 for each body mount. Now before you put everything back together, what you're going to want to do is pull out this pin right here. If you have a hard time getting it out, you can go ahead and pull off this metal plate, but you are going to have to remove the skid plate in order to pull it off all the way. Once you remove that pin, you're going to pull out the arm, and you're going to see there's a hidden screw right there that needs to be replaced. Once you replace that screw, you can go ahead and slide back in the arm and replace the pin. Now, important little note, that screw is only on the newer versions of the E-Revo. So if you have one of the original mini E-Revos, that screw will not be there. Now I can go ahead and slide on the front mount and reinstall these 3 screws that hold it down and the 4 screws that hold in the front shocks. With the front taken care of, now it's time to move on to the back. I'm going to start by removing these 3 screws. With those 3 out of the way, I'm going to move to the back and then take out these 2 screws. And now I'm going to pull off the rear body mount. There is 2 screws I need to replace for the bumper. On this side, I have 4 screws to replace that hold on the wing mount, 2 more screws that hold on the body post, and then 2 more on top that hold on the wing mount. Once you get all those screws replaced, there's still 2 more to get. These ones right here. And now finally we can go ahead and reattach the rear body mount. We got 2 screws in the back, 3 on top, and then I'm going to reattach the shocks by redoing all 4 screws. Now that that's all back together, I need to go ahead and replace each one of these screws that hold in the rear battery vent. Now it's time to swing down to the arm, and I'm going to be replacing the screw at the top and bottom of the push rod and the screw at this end of the tie rod. I won't be able to replace this screw because it is a shoulder screw, and RC screws never includes shoulder screws in their kits. And I'm going to be doing this for both sides. Now it's time to swing to the front. I'm going to replace the screw at each end of the push rod, the screw at this end of the turnbuckle, and I'm going to be doing it for each side. And with those 6 screws in place, I am finally done with the RC itself. However, the last 2 screws hold the motor mount to the motor, and you're going to have to take the pinion gear off by removing that grub screw. Lucky for me though, I already replaced these screws a long time ago, so I'm just going to go ahead and slide the motor back on, reattach the motor heatsink, the gear cover, and put the tires back on, and I am done. And I am finally completely done with this upgrade. I did forget to mention that you can replace this screw right here. Other than that, I have to say Jester looks really good. Since this theme is black and white or silver and black, these screws fit right in. Other than that, yeah, RC Screws leaves you with plenty of leftovers and an awesome case you can do whatever you want with. As for all the stock screws, whew, there's a lot of them, and some of those were a pain to get to. But I'm going to go ahead and hold on to the good ones because who knows, I might build another 1/16 in the future. Other than that, thank you very much, Coyote, for the awesome donation, but this upgrade is done with. And that was Jester's level 25 upgrade.